On the hour. Let's get started. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Erica Martin. I am the current president here at Get More Math. But I will tell you, I taught for 14 years, 2 years at the middle school, 12 years at the high school. So I know how it feels to feel a little burned out. I will also tell you that I know how it feels to be on fire for something and to be excited and to be motivated and to be in a place where you are actually enjoying teaching. You know, it's interesting. We're constantly reaching out to teachers, but this particular message really resonated with teachers right now. There's a lot of teachers out there that are feeling very, very burned out. And so I'm hoping that today I will be able to offer you some tips, some tricks, and hopefully some solutions that might help you just sort of reinvigorate that love for teaching that we all had at some point. So I'll tell you, as I was preparing for this a few days ago, I got onto ChatGPT. I don't know how many of you have tiptoed into that world. And I asked ChatGPT, I said, what are the top reasons that math teachers are burnout? I have several friends that are still in the classroom. I know what they tell me. I know why I was burnout when I was there. But I just want to share with you what ChatGPT told me. And I'm curious to know how many of these reasons resonate with you. First, it said constant pressure from high stakes tests. And it was interesting that that was the very first reason. And I thought, well, that certainly tracks with me. Heavy workload, very little planning time. I will tell you, in my district, we had such a hard time getting substitutes that my one single planning period was eaten up all 80% of my week because I was constantly having to substitute or cover for other classes. We've got the learning gaps. Thank you, COVID. The wide gaps in student knowledge. So, we're teaching a specific grade. Those kids have to be prepared for that high stakes test. And meanwhile, they're coming in with these gaps that are sometimes 1, 2, 3 years in size. The always changing new initiative, right? If you've taught for any number of years, I can see Louise up there kind of chuckling. Yeah, there's always something new. And it's interesting. I'm going to tell you about something new today. So it's not that I think teachers are not interested in trying something new. It's when they don't have any kind of input, any kind of say, any kind of control, which funny enough was the next reason that ChatGPT told me that teachers are feeling burnt out. And I would agree with that as well. Behavior issues of students, you better believe it. And I got to say it, low pay with high stress. That's not why any of us got into the profession. We weren't planning to be millionaires, but sometimes you just want to feel like you're being paid for the work that you put in. Here's what I can tell you. I cannot change what you're being paid. So there is nothing I can do about that particular cause for burnout. And I can't really address the behavior issues of your kids. However, I am excited to tell you that Get More Math, for me and for so many of our teachers, is addressing these 5 issues up here. We have teachers that will tell us, I was on the verge of retirement, and Get More Math has now told me that I can handle 2, 3, 4 more years. We have a teacher in Pennsylvania who just recently sent us a video and said, I could never imagine teaching without this tool because it so positively impacts all of these things. So we're going to talk about Get More Math. We're going to talk about some of the changes that it can sort of bring to you in your classroom. But before you say, oh, good gravy, she's just going to talk to us about a product, I want you to know that everyone on this call is going to be able to start a 30-day trial immediately. As soon as you're done, you're going to get an email with a link to get your hands on Get More Math today, which is great. It's summer. You don't have students. Of course, you can go in and explore, but this is phenomenal. At Get More Math, a program that, mind you, was created by a teacher in his classroom over 20 years, he wants to make sure that when someone is trying Get More Math, they have it for an entire school year, okay? So what we do is we work with campuses to become pilot partners. And if they are willing to pilot with us, we will give you unlimited teacher accounts, unlimited student accounts through next July. So July 31st of 2026, not this July, but next. We need a campus admin to provide their approval, and we will give you 3 free trainings if you're interested. But at this point, you're thinking, Erica, I don't know if I'm interested. We'll circle back to this at the end. Here's what I want you to expect for today. We're going to talk about a problem. If you relate to the problem, you're going to love the solution. If what I state is the problem is not a problem for you, then you can jump off the call. You don't need it. What we're going to talk about is how Get More Math is going to offer you several different tools to kind of address this problem. And like I said, we will wrap up with next steps for the free pilot offer if that's something you're interested in. So let's get started simply here with the problem. Now, how many of you spend your typical math day teaching a lesson and giving your kids practice? I did. That's what I did for 12 years. And then I put those days together into a unit. At the end of that unit, I was going to give my students a test. And what does every good math teacher do before the test? They give their kids a review. Yeah, that's what most math teachers do. Teach new, practice new, have a unit test. We're good teachers. Most of the time, the kids pass the test. So what do we do after chapter 1? Well, we've got a whole year's worth of curriculum to get through, so we move on to chapter 2. Same thing, teach, practice, test chapter 2. And we do that again for chapter 3, and we do that again for chapter 4, and we go through the year. And what's happening as the year goes on? What happens by the time you get to chapter 7 or chapter 8 or chapter 12? Do you notice that my circles are becoming faded? Sometimes they disappear altogether. Because by the time you get to the last chapter, every math teacher does this. Okay, class, it's time for the end of year assessment. I need you to now all be prepared and ready to take a test that covers everything that I've taught all year. Even though all year long, I've prepared you with these little chapter tests, now I need you to take a cumulative test on everything. And in reality, what do your kids remember? They might remember the last chapter. They might be able to pull back the last few chapters, but let's be real. What's happening to the whole beginning of the year? It's probably gone. Now you're panicking. You're having to come up with all these materials in order to reteach everything that has disappeared from their brain. So I'm curious, how many of you don't have to have your camera on, but if you do, can you give me like a thumbs up if you're like, yes, in my math classroom, this is what happens. Okay, thank you, Louise. Yes, it's what happened with my kids. I was a good teacher. They could learn the material. The problem was they couldn't retain it. What we do as math teachers, teaching the lesson, practicing the new material, it works great in the short term. It does not work great for long-term results. And we all know that. That's why we feel burnt out. It's why we feel frustrated. We are working hard and the results are not reflecting the hard work we're putting in. Okay, that's the problem. So what's the solution? Josh Britton, first year of teaching, experienced exactly what I just described. They passed every test and the majority of his kids failed the final. And he thought, okay, something has to change. So the first thing he changed was his single day. He went down to the smallest unit, one single math day, and he said, you know what? I still need to teach a lesson. I have to get through a certain amount of curriculum. Of course, I need my students to practice that new material. I need to see, did they in fact learn what I just taught them? But he realized if we do not implement consistent spiral review, it's going to be for nothing. We're going to get to the end of the year and the majority of our work is going to be gone. So this green chunk of spiral review is critical. It's critical. Now, I liked it. A lot of you were giving me the thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up if you're already doing spiral review. If you're like, Erica, this is not a brand new concept that you've thought of. Okay, I see some thumbs. I see some hands going like this. Sure. Some of us are maybe doing it as a bell ringer. Maybe we do it once a week. Maybe we try to implement some spiral review. That's about the best we can do because we're human. And remember, we have like no planning time. So it's no wonder that might be all we're doing. But guess what? Josh Britton built a program that said, I am going to provide my students practice on new material, and then I'm going to remember all the previous things they've ever practiced, and I'm going to give them practice on spiral review, but I'm going to do it in such a way that not everybody gets the same spiral review. That's what we're doing, right? Here's your bell ringer. Here's 3 old concepts. The computer is excellent at figuring out, what does Tony need to practice the most because she's really struggling with it from 4 days ago? And what does Lady need to practice from last chapter that she just has not really mastered yet? So what he realized was the computer does great at tracking the data and ensuring that the students are practicing exactly what they need to review, as opposed to here, everybody needs to get the same practice because it's what I just taught. So let's keep going. If you take that concept and you put it together in a whole unit, same thing, teaching, 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 all the new material. Now, guess what? You won't be shocked to know that when a math teacher creates an online math program, he didn't want the computer to teach the lesson. He wanted to teach the lesson. So we have nothing instructional in Get More Math. Okay, so when you see this little blue piece of the pie where I'm saying you teach the lesson, you are still teaching the lesson. However, when you provide your kids practice on new material and old material, guess what happens when a student struggles with day 3? They see that content in the spiral review on day 4, and they see it in the spiral review on day 5, and day 6, and day 7, and day 8, and they continue seeing it because exactly, Regina, that's right. She's nodding her head. She's saying that's what we need. So that when it comes time to take the test, guess what you can do as the teacher? You can make that test cumulative. Huh? Yes, you can. You can start to prepare your students and say, guess what? When I teach chapter 1, of course, that test is going to be on chapter 1. But guess what happens when I teach chapter 2? I can, in good conscience, include skills from chapter 2 and chapter 1. Why? Because remember, if every day they're getting spiral review, guess what they're practicing during chapter 2? They're still practicing the skills from chapter 1. And guess what happens by the time they make it to chapter 4? Can you give a test that covers everything from chapter 4, but some of the skills from chapter 3 and some of the skills from chapter 2 and some of the skills from chapter 1? You absolutely can. Why? Because every day when they're practicing in that green spiral review, they are getting content from all 4 chapters. Okay? Now, as that year moves on and the tests, look at the gray circle, they get a little bit bigger every time. Now, I know you only have a certain amount of time to test your kids, so you might only be able to choose 2 or 3 skills from each chapter. That's okay. When you get to the end of the year and it's time to take the big, scary tests that covers everything, guess what? Your kids are not panicked about that at all, because the big test is not even a big test anymore. It's just the last test. This is what Mrs. Martin has done for me all year long. My tests were always measuring a little bit of everything. Okay? Now, if you're thinking, Erica, this sounds great in theory, but my kids are just going to fail that. I can barely get them to pass the chapter test, let alone all of it. No, they won't. I'm telling you from experience, if we support our students by giving them the cumulative spiral review practice consistently that they need, they will be prepared to take those consistent cumulative exams. Okay? All right. That's my problem solution. I'm hoping that you've bought into at least part of that. Now, let me tell you, if you're thinking, Erica, the spiral review sounds great, but I'm not really looking for a testing system, it's okay. You don't have to do it all. I'm just showing you that all of it is available to you. Here's your first look at the teacher app. When you log in as a teacher, you will have 2 tabs, one to build and manage your classes, and one to build and manage your work. We're going to primarily focus on the work tab today. Every teacher will have access to every grade level. So if you teach 7th grade and you say, Erica, you remember those learning gaps you talked about in the beginning? I need to pull in skills from 4th and 5th grade. No problem, because you will be in control of every skill that is ever put in front of your students. We're not a curriculum. We don't set some scope and sequence standard and say, guess what? This is what your students have to work on. Absolutely not. You're in control. So once you select the grade you want, you can then view our skills over here. So if you choose 6th grade, you can browse by topic. You can browse by state standard. So if you are from Florida, we've got the Florida Best. If you're from Georgia, we've got the new Georgia standards. If you're from Texas, I will tell you, we are TEKS aligned, and I know lots of people say they're TEKS aligned. No, we are actually TEKS aligned. The amount of Texas teachers that have worked for us to build these skills, you will love the Texas collections. We also have something called a unit guide that very nicely mimics most, as well as our, okay, did you guys catch that? I think I got muted. After you select your skill, over here is where you will build your assignments. So remember, you're teaching a lesson, lesson 1, you want to give your kids practice on lesson 1. You teach lesson 2, you want to give your kids practice on lesson 2. Let's see what that looks like. You'll simply create an assignment. I'm sort of showing you lesson 5. Now, what happens is within the skill bank, this teacher found determining least common multiple of 2 numbers up to 100. So they taught the lesson. They then pulled in the new skill, that's the purple part, and then Get More Math is going to provide practice in spiral review, which will include any skill that was from lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, or lesson 4. Now, how much practice is completely controlled by you, the teacher. I have this set as 3 of the new problems and 8 of the old problems. And when you do that, every assignment, your kids consistently understand that, yes, they need to demonstrate that they understand today's lesson, but they also need to demonstrate that they understand the previous lessons. Here's what it looks like as a student. I've logged in. Here's my lesson 5. You can see I am given a least common multiple question. Up here in this section, it says targeted skills. This could say new skills. This is what your teacher wants to target for everybody. So everyone in the class is doing 3 of this new skill. Now what's happening down here? Look at all these different squares. They are all a previous skill that was assigned back in August or September or October or November. So obviously when your students start, this would be blank until the assignments start to grow and your list starts to build. So there's 3 of the new and 8 of the old. Now let's talk about what all these colors mean. I loved that I could walk around the room and stop at any student's screen and immediately see the red squares. Anybody want to guess? If you're a math teacher, you know what red is. Red means not proficient. So those are the skills this student is still struggling with. White means not enough data. That's why our brand new skill up here is white. We haven't done enough practice. Initial understanding is yellow. So once I do 3 of these problems, Get More Math will either say yellow, you understand it, or red, you do not understand it. So it was a great little exit ticket for me to quickly see where my students fell on the new concept. Now, as they cycle through the skills from previous lessons, what we hope is that the skills turn green, silver, and gold. Now, that is determined by understanding over time. Okay? It doesn't mean they did 50 correct the day you taught it. I would bet most of your kids could do that. You're probably a good teacher. You probably taught a good lesson. Of course, they can do it 50 times today. I want to know, can they do it 3 days later? Can they do it 1 day later? Can they do it 1 month later? Now, Do you remember me saying earlier that when Josh said, okay, I want to build a system to deliver spiral review, but I actually need it to be different for each one of my kids. I need Regina's spiral review to be specifically what Regina needs to review, and I need Savannah's to be a little bit different for Savannah. So the way we individualize it is through the dollar signs. Do you notice that some of these squares have dollar signs on them and some of them do not? The only problems that are eligible to be practiced, it's the only one the kids can click on and do problems, are the ones with the dollar signs. So unfortunately, if your students were listening, they'd be like, this is perfect. Put me in spiral review, Miss Foster. I don't mind. I'll just find the skills I'm good at and I'll just sit and do them all day long. No, no, no. Get More Math is going to ensure that these weaker skills, white, red, and yellow, are included in the spiral review frequently because they need to continue to build their proficiency on these skills. So your kids will see these more often. But what about the stronger ones? What if because you're really strong at a skill in September, should we just never show it to you again? Absolutely not. That's what other programs do, but we do not do that. We say, guess what? Even your strongest skills will be included in spiral review occasionally, because if you don't see them, there is a very good chance you will lose that. So strong skills will be included occasionally. Weaker skills will be included frequently. Those decisions are made on a student by student basis so that you don't have to. Okay. All right. We talked about the spiral review. If you love it, you can try it. You can have it for the entire first year. Okay. But I also want to go back to that concept of assessments because it was just as impactful for my students as the spiral review was. So let's go back and talk about assessments for a moment. If you notice down here, I have the option to create folders, exams, or assignments. What you just saw was an assignment. The student was practicing the new material and the old material. Now I want to show you what it looks like to create an exam. Okay, I'm going to click Create Exam. And let's assume I'm creating an exam for Unit 5. Well, if I did my job, I'm hoping I convinced you that you may want to include some version of all the skills. Well, that's super simple. I've already found the skills for Unit 5 by making the assignments. I simply pull them into my exam. And now I want some version of the old skills. No problem. They're all right there. I simply grab them and I pull them into my exam as well. Full teacher control. You determine how many of each question you want. In fact, newly released within the last few weeks, you can even choose the question itself. So when we say identify percents as strip diagrams in a real world context, we're going to dynamically generate lots of variations. You can cycle through until you find the exact question you want. Okay, tons of teacher control. You're going to love this. Why? They're automatically graded for you. Saving time. You can spend more time teaching, more time working with your students, less time grading papers. Once it's graded, if you're a good math teacher, I'm going to say you're probably going to want to look at the questions they missed. You can do that. You can see their exact answers. So I want you to look at this problem here. Here's Carol. She missed 5 questions. This exact question, what is the rate of change? She answered undefined and that was wrong. Okay. I have the ability to override it, full teacher control if I want. And guess what happens? As soon as I save Carol's grade, something is automatically created and sent back to Carol. It is individualized specifically for her. It is an assignment called corrections. And what we are asking her to do is correct the 5 problems from her test. Do you recognize this problem? This was the problem from the test that she missed. That is her exact wrong answer. So imagine if you had a nice, easy, low work, low effort, I would almost say no effort way to send your students errors back to them for corrections. But let's take it a step further. Once she corrects every mistake, now I'd like to see, well, Carol, let's practice some new ones. So if this is rate of change and she fixes that one, guess what she's going to practice next? Rate of change, fresh new problem. If she misses factoring, okay, great. Fix your factoring, now practice some factoring. How much additional practice? That's controlled by the teacher. This teacher decided to do one of each. You can do two of each, three of each, full teacher control. All right. So now my tests are more than grades in a grade book. I'm actually going to take the results. I'm going to have my students hopefully learn from their results, but how do I know if it works? Well, we've got that too, because we are going to automatically create a follow-up test for each student that includes only the skills they missed on the original exam. Remember, Carol missed 5 questions. Right here are the 5 that she missed. They're going to be fresh new versions. Of course, Get More Math is going to automatically grade it for me. And what I am going to be able to see is a clear picture of growth. I would open up my teacher app. I would see a list of all of my students. Here is her exam score, 15 out of 20. What is her follow-up score a week later? 4 out of 5. That was growth for me. That was like, listen, I actually used the results of this assessment to do some remediation, and it worked. It also helped my students realize they couldn't just take a test, get a grade, move on, and never see that content again. They realized that it was actually going to continue to be part of their process. All right, you've made it. We've talked about Get More Math, how we break that constant forgetting cycle through that individualized spiral review, the targeted practice to help you see, did my students understand today's lesson? We've got all of these assessment capabilities with corrections and remediation and retesting. I didn't even mention that everything is printable. So if you are someone that also likes to have hands-on practice, you've got that. You can easily collaborate with your colleagues during that pilot program. You can create and share tests, create and share assessments. You can even have co-teacher access to share student data. And what I loved most was the full teacher control. However I wanted to implement Get More Math into my classroom, there was always a way to tweak a setting, change something in order for it to do what I needed in my classroom. All right, let's talk about the pilot. There's 2 catches. The first catch is, because the pilot is for your campus, we need some building level administrator to meet with us, watch this demo, watch this webinar, provide their approval. Once they do that, we'll work with them to submit their staff roster. We'll get all your teachers rostered. We'll determine what kind of training plan do they want for their staff. Do they want live group demos like this with a Get More Math trainer in Zoom? Or would they prefer an on-demand recorded session? That's fine as well. We will also ask to meet with that admin 2 to 3 times over the course of the year, just to kind of check on the progress of the pilot. We don't want to do a set it and forget it. We want to really kind of work with you to ensure you have the best experience possible. And then I've already said that the requirement for the teachers is just that they complete 3 of these trainings. This is an incredibly robust program. There is a lot available to you, and we want to make sure that you're aware of that. Each training is only 30 minutes, so should be easily completed, let's say, in a planning period, after school, before school. As I said, they can be done live or in a video. You will receive an email. I believe I set it for 4 hours. So depending on where you're at, 4 o'clock Eastern, you can do the math. Otherwise, you're going to get this email in your inbox. You're going to have 3 really important links. Schedule a one-on-one demo. This is just if you want to meet with me or your account manager. Maybe you forward this to your principal and you say, use this link to meet with Erica. I want this pilot, but we really want to make sure that everybody is involved and on board. There's the link to create your free teacher account if you didn't already do it. That will give you 30-day access to kind of log in and play with it. And lastly, the final link will be the recording of this exact webinar. So you're obviously welcome to revisit it or share it with others as well. Okay. You are also welcome to reply. A lot of times you get this email and literally the email address says no reply at blank, blank, blank. No. This is my email. You are welcome to reply to me, ask me any questions. I'm happy to kind of do whatever I need to help get this at your campus if you think it's something that could help you kind of move from that burnt out phase to, you know what, this sounds like it could actually meet the needs of my students and be something that could be truly beneficial for our kiddos. All right, it is 12:30. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I am actually going to stick around. I am going to hit stop recording. And if anybody wants to stay and has questions, they are welcome to do that. Otherwise, you are welcome to sign off and go enjoy your summer. Thank you so much for the time. Today.